Radio, your number one online Islamic talk station.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to Middle Path Radio, and I'm your host, Kamal Hussein. Welcome to another evening of Straight Talk. Our show has moved to 9 p.m. Thursdays, and a little bit late for some people, but we really appreciate that you are taking the time out to listen to this show. Please do ring in and share your thoughts and comments with us. Our number is, as usual, 074-77080-248, or you can tweet us at Middle Path Radio. Please do ring in or text and get involved, inshallah. Don't forget, you can listen to all our previous shows on our YouTube channel, Middle Path Radio, and there is now also a link provided so you can download the podcast. So alhamdulillah. Also, you can check out our new Straight Talk website, which is www.straight-.co.uk, featuring all our previous shows for you to listen to wherever and whenever. You can download the podcast as well, inshallah. In addition, there is continuous news updates and reviews, so do check it out. And so our website is www.straight-talk.co.uk. Let's get back to the show. Last week we discussed Channel 4's documentary, What British Muslims Really Think, presented by Trevor Phillips. We looked at some of the issues he raised in the program and had an interesting discussion, which was presented by Brother Quddus Ali. So tonight we want to look at minorities living in Britain and the whole concept of minorities in a society, its functions, rights, contributions, and what are the vulnerabilities of being a minority citizen. So tonight in the studio we have Brother Amaduddin, who's a community activist, and Brother Abu Umair, who is our local, who is a contributor to this show, really. So to discuss the topic, inshallah, let's start with Brother Ahmad. Thank you for coming down and taking part in tonight's discussion. So who are viewed as minorities in society, and how did this evolve in Britain? I mean, where did all these minorities come from?
Assalamu alaikum to all the viewers. Jazakallah khair for having me. If we're talking about minorities that came to the UK, we have to start around the 1700s.
Oh no!
I'm going to give you a bit of a history. Okay. We have to really understand this topic.
Okay.
Merchants came through the slave trade, and they were bought in as African slaves. Then in the 1800s, there was a lot of black and Chinese seamen started settling in small numbers. And around the 1830 to 1850, tens of thousands of Irish people arrived in the UK, fleeing poverty at home due to the famine and many of the other issues. So, and as the British Empire expanded, many people were now interacting with Britain and were arriving. During the Second World War, almost 60,000 British merchant seamen came from the Indian subcontinent. And some of these men stayed in Britain during the wars and formed small communities, mainly around ports like Liverpool, Southampton, even in East
Were they economic migrants?
Mainly economic migrants as well. They came from like permits or sea permits as well. And as I said, from Bangladesh, like the Bengali Lascars, they're very well known. They went to work in the Scottish collieries, and they were very subjected to very racial prejudice. At the end of the Second World War, there were really shortages in Europe due to the loss of life, and the government looked at migrants. 150,000 Polish people came, and they were the first groups to settle in the UK in a large number. Then, as we know, many people from the West Indies came, and they would drive the buses and do other jobs that they needed.
Why were they coming in? I mean, sorry, I'm just going to cut you in. I mean, you've given us so much, but why were they coming in? I mean,
they were mainly coming in as after Second World War, there was a lot of shortage of manpower to rebuild the UK, and many of the services that needed, like bus driving, trains, or actually factories to produce stock, there wasn't enough people to do the job.
Were they brought in as skilled workers, or is it because they didn't have manpower?
Mainly not skilled workers. They were just unskilled, working in factories, long hours, that didn't need much training. People went in there, and it was mainly young men that would come in the early after the World War. Then after we see in the 70s, there was a lot more migration, and a lot of Commonwealth people came, and this is when they started to bring their families. So minorities have existed through a long time in the UK as well, and we can see as well, even up to today, we have a lot of migrants coming now mainly from Afghanistan, from Somalia, from Iraq and Syria, and these are migrants. But migrants have been coming to UK since 1700s.
Okay, Brother Abu Umar?
Yes, my actually take on this. Assalamu alaikum for actually having me on the show as well. My actually
it's nice to have you.
Thank you very much. My take on this whole issue about minorities is actually I would go back even more more earlier than the 1700s. Britain has always been a land of actually immigrants or ethnic
land of opportunity for immigrants.
Immigrants.
Okay.
If you go back to even go back long time ago, if you go back to the Italians first came and they are known as Romans.
Okay.
So if you go back to also Britain has been actually a melting pot of different nations.
Why is that?
So, for example,
why are they?
Because the thing is, any nation, if you look look at this, is that there's no such thing as purely indigenous people in any country. If you look at US, you'll find that originally there were the Red Indians. Before that, there could have been other tribes living over there. Then we had the Irish. Then we had the British. Then the Australians also went in there. And similarly, if we look at Britain also, Britain has been actually comprised of people from the Northern Europeans. So you have the Danish, you have the people from Norway, you have the people from the Italy, so forth. This is why you have the name called Normandy. The word Normandy comes from Normans or Norway. Okay. So Normandy is a city is in France. Wow. But these people actually came and battled with the United Kingdom. So you have an influx of people coming over here as well. As I said about the Romans, because of the expansion of Roman Empire, people came into Britain as well. You have the Saxons who came from Germany. So these people came, and there is no indigenous people. If you look it's a matter of time. Yeah.
Okay.
If we say that, for example, these are ethnic minorities, then what will we actually call, the Romans and the Normans?
So are you saying the minorities are the majority, or it's the minorities that built Britain?
I think what Abu Umar is trying to say is countries like America, they were founded by immigrants or minorities, and they obviously went in and took over, and they became the majority. Again, with Australia as well, example, it was built on minorities. And then the original people that were the Aborigines were living there, and they became now the minorities after a long time.
Sorry, Brother Abu Umar,
and the thing is that the way to actually look at minorities is actually not to actually look at them in their eyes or despising them, but to see them as a resource for the country, because it's actually the people who actually make a country, strengthen a country, and make a country progressive. And this is why we found that in Britain after the Industrial Revolution, it needed a lot of labor, force of labor. We also saw that like Brother Ahmad has said, that after this First World War and Second World War, when Britain actually lost its might, if you like, at one time it was a colonial power throughout the world. It was known as the the empire where the sun never set. But it lost that ability that strength.
Because
after
it lost the manpower.
It lost a lot of manpower through the First World War, through the Second World War. And because of that, it couldn't keep up with its empire business around the world. This is why you found that a lot of countries were actually seeking independence. You had, for example, Australians, you have the New Zealanders seeking for their independence. Then same rise has happened in India and subcontinent as well.
And in Africa as well.
So they demanded as well their independence.
Okay.
And what has happened is that when Britain thought that they had to actually flee away from those countries because there was a lot of uprising, it had actually it facilitated a sort of a link up after the colonial time where those nations can become part of the Commonwealth countries.
Well, that's where the Commonwealth
That's
came
where
in,
the word Commonwealth came from. And then it actually, I remember my parents actually, when they came, they were actually given sort of like, because my relatives also actually, came from the seas as well, from the ships, and they worked in the ships. And after that, they settled in, Britain, and Britain then gave them the right to actually, go and bring your spouses, go and bring your children, because it needed the labor force to
Well, they had this
rebuild.
concept of boy voucher, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
vouchers and things
a lot
like
of people came in with those vouchers.
That's right, exactly. And many people came with that because there was a lot of demand, there was a lot of encouragement. Don't go back to your countries. Stay here. Help us rebuild this country. Bring your relatives, bring your sons and daughters and wives. And this is how a lot of people actually brought in their
Britain
sons.
needed the migrants.
It desperately needed the people because it was in a state that it couldn't even actually manufacture anything. There a lot of women were actually put into the workforce because men has a lot of men were actually killed in the different wars.
Yeah.
And it was a desperate situation then. So minorities, Britain has a lot to owe to the minorities.
But saying that, it did create a lot of problems, isn't it, in Britain? I mean, the tension and the hatred and
Definitely, naturally,
what do you have to say?
when you bring different people in together, that
They have different ideas.
different cultures, different ways of doing things, different values, you're going to get that clash. And this is what exactly happened when mass migration happened. If we see in the 50s, there was a rise of racial violence, and many areas like Birmingham, Nottingham, West London experienced rioting as white people feared the arrival of black or ethnic minorities. But on one hand, they wanted these people to work, but on the other hand, they resented these people coming in saying they're taking their jobs and stuff like that. And then we have the politicians in that time making speeches, and they even felt that this is getting out of hand. Like Enoch Powell, the Rivers of Blood speech, a famous speech in 1968, where he incited mass beatings of black and Asian minorities. Even landladies, this is where problems happen, where landladies with rooms to rent would say and put notices up saying no blacks, no dogs, or no Irish.
I remember back in the 80s.
This is it.
There used to be a lot of programs. Afghanistan, I don't know if you remember. Brother Abu Umar may be aware, and it was a very overtly racist comedy where they used to, really demonize the black community. And
I think we need to really understand as well the problems the politicians felt. Like Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, as we know, said she said a very famous but controversial speech. She said people are really rather afraid that this country might be swamped by people with a different culture. The British character has done so much for democracy, for law, and done so much throughout the world that if there is any fear that it might be swamped, people are going to react and be rather hostile to these coming in. And boy, was she right. There was a lot of hostility, and I'm not that old as some of you, but I grew up with racism, and I seen.
Well, we grew up with racism,
and it was really bad in the 80s, 90s, and
certain areas you couldn't go in because obviously. But my point is, I just want to maybe come back because you just said, you had the politicians and you had politicians who are overtly racist in their approach. But in one hand, they invited. They needed those migrants, to build the Great Britain, and on the other hand, there was their resentments. And why do you think that is?
I think this is where I think it goes back to the issue of can they deal with minorities? have they ever dealt with minorities, and can they really produce a cohesive society with the system that they have? And this is where it goes down to that they couldn't. And they had it was like a catch-22 situation where on one hand they wanted prosperity, economics, revival, but on the other hand they realized that they're losing part of their culture, and they had that, it's a colonial mindset they still have, that we are better than you, and we in minorities should not be given a certain mindset. And this is what happened. It's a colonial mindset that they still had, that they couldn't really actually know how to deal with people. And as maybe later on I can explain how the different stages they went through trying to deal with the minorities and how they failed at every turn.
Brother Umar, maybe you want to explain, like, how our parents faced racism here. What do you think? Do you think, how did they deal with it?
I think there was a lot of incidences, down in Brick Lane. I remember my relatives, when they used to go out of their homes, they used to carry sort of like clenched fist, in case if someone were to come and attack them. I remember, I don't have to even go back to my parents. I can even say about my friends, who were in schools, they were actually taunted as Pakis. They used to call everyone a Paki. So even Bangladesh is a Paki, because they thought that, everyone was from
anyone
Bangladesh.
Asian was effectively.
Okay, so yes. And they used to taunt racist comments at them. And I think the fascists were quite rife in the 80s. There was a lot of problem.
The NF.
That's right. People's windows were broken. Stones were thrown at their windows. So people actually lived in a very sort of like the community, ethnic minority community lived in a kind of a fear climate. And it was reminiscent of how the Irish used to actually live in ghettos when they came from Ireland, because also Britain needed, labor force even then, because you had the, potato famine in Ireland.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, USA restricted immigration going to USA.
Yeah.
So they were coming over here. They were a considerable part of the British labor force, but because they were Roman Catholics, they did not get on with the Protestants of this country.
Okay.
And there was this clash.
Yeah.
And I think these sort of clashes actually happen. No, one of the things is actually what Brother Ahmad has said. Actually, he gave his reason. The other reason is that it actually happens because of shallow. I think when you have a shallow mentality, I think capitalism and secularism does not provide people with the high level of understanding of the values of life, the way to actually view world, the way to actually view humanity, and the goal and objective of this life. And it doesn't actually link it to the hereafter. And because people don't actually have this comprehensive understanding of man and humanity, life, and how to interact with other people tend to have this shallow understanding that, these people have come to actually take my jobs away. These people, because of these people, we're not going to get enough housing.
But things are not. Do you think things are changing now?
Definitely, things are not changing. Because
you were just about to say
things have actually become worse, specifically for the Muslim community, because I think the Muslim community has actually retained its values and identity when it comes to abiding by Islam and practices to do with day-to-day lives.
I'm going to take a couple of texts. I think we've got a lot of texts coming in, but I'll read them out. And what you can do is basically maybe you can respond to some of those if you feel that there's something that our listeners can benefit from there. So the first text, he says, "It appears to me that you are essentially arguing that minorities have been discriminated in the UK, but I disagree because there has been many legislation enacted by Parliament to protect minorities. What do the panelists think?" Okay, that's the first one. Shall I read another one? And maybe, So the second text, or one of the texts here, "Will you not agree that things have now improved and getting there?" And this is from Lisa from London. Okay. Another one, it says, the incidents that you are regarding racism were in the past. Well, I think what he's saying is basically the incidents that you guys are talking about were in the past. We have moved on, and this is Maruf from London as well. So thank you for sending the text in. I'm glad you're putting your name on the text, so at least our panelists can refer to the text.
If I could answer Lisa's question.
Yeah, go for it. She said, will you not agree that things have improved and we are getting there?
So the generations that grew up in the 70s, 80s and 90s, they grew up, the minorities I'm talking about, they grew up with the racism and they've seen it. And those are the ones that will really know what happened on those times. And Lisa is right. It has racism. People are not being beaten up in the streets as they were before. Groups of people are not going around beating up people. Racism has improved in one sense, but it has moved on to social media as well. So there is a issues with racism still, but it's not as it was in the 80s or 90s. But what's happened now, the generation...
Is it because violence is not linked with racism now? I mean, people make racist comments. I mean, I see a lot of racist, Islamophobic and anti-Semitic comments.
Some of them, they're very shocking. As I said, they've moved on from the streets. Now the racism is on. People won't say it to your face. They would not even say it to your face, but they will say it on social media. When you go up and post about things, about anything, you will see a post about Islam come on, and like the Daily Mail or some of these papers that will put up a post on Facebook. Read the comments, 300, 400 comments, and they are very vile, very abusive. And someone reading that as a minority, they're racist, and it can actually get...
The sad thing is you could get away. Sometimes I would rather face them and deal with it. Sometimes I feel like I'd rather face them and deal with it than actually to put up with these comments. You're behind this screen and you can say whatever you want, really, isn't it?
So and also I would like to say to Lisa is, one more thing is... the new generation are facing not racism, but it's a growing hatred towards Islam and Muslims. And the new generation, my children or even ourselves now, this is a new challenge that we're facing. A growing threat that Islam is a threat. People are Muslims are this and Muslims are that.
So do you think it's moving to like religion?
It's more religious now, more religious, and people are now saying maybe the Hindus are all right, the Sikhs are all right, but we got issue with the Muslims.
Is that a new face for racism?
It's not a face of racism. It's moved on. Racism is on there still. People still hate. People will tell you to go to your country, but now there's a new attachment where they say now it's your religion. Go. We have a problem with Muslims, and our children are affected by the media and the politicians, what they're happening, and this is something that needs to be dealt with. And the children growing up nowadays really feel that they are, as Muslims, they're under the spotlight, and this is a new challenge. Maybe they're not physically being attacked, but they are having to deal with the emotions or the mental issues about the people.
I think that answers Maruf's question, but sorry, Brother Abu Umair, you wanted to come in?
What other questions did you have over there?
So the incidents you are talking about, racism, which was in the past, we have moved on, and that was from Maruf. We have another text here, which says, when you talk about minorities, are you talking about Asians or Muslims? Can you be clear?
I think the whole thing about minorities...
And that's Bilal from London.
Yeah, I think the whole thing about minorities actually is more... So as I said in the beginning, the whole thing about, the Normans or the Saxons, those people are not actually included now. Yeah. So when we talk about minorities, we are talking more about Asians. We're talking about...
Well, is it Asians now? Has it moved on to Muslims? Because I think Brother Ahmad was saying that, look, it's actually moved on to Muslims.
No, I don't know. When it comes to attack and being offensive to a particular community, then it's obviously Muslims. But when you're talking about minorities, we are talking about people, the immigrant people who actually emigrated into these countries, let's say in the late 20th century. Yeah. Let's say, so it's about Polish people, it's about the Asian, Pakistani people, those kind of people particularly. So these are the people are regarded as minority. But minority... There are United Nations charters which actually enshrines the rights of the minorities, and these are used as a tool by NGOs in foreign nations to actually put pressure on foreign governments, to to maintain human rights and democracy and the so-called rule of law. We know that sometimes this rule of law can be really hypocritical and could be one-sided. So these are enshrined over there, where it says that due to their people's race, color and religion, a section of the community must not be actually sort of like biased against, or they should not be actually mistreated. But when we see, for example, like in Britain as well, we have all these immigrants. Yes, the situation has improved a lot more since the 80s. But like the brother has said, that when you look at the social media, the amount of vile comments, sometimes very, very filthy and scary comments, I would say, will take your daylights out of your hearts, if you were to actually read them. And in terms of violence as well, I think the Muslim community has been in the brunt of being receiving on the violence end, because you have the mosques, set on fire. You have women's, hijabs, ripped off. Recently you had an attack on an imam who was coming from Birmingham. He was old imam who was actually stabbed to death. So you've got all these racial tensions. And the question that we need to actually ask is that why is all these racial tensions being stoked up? And I think this is the politicians and the media is stoking up these racial tensions due to squabbling over a few votes when it comes to elections. And this is why you have the rise of the far right and the Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage and some other politicians actually, gone on to the comment to actually say that people who are foreigners, who are immigrants, ethnic minorities, these are the people who have AIDS, and this is because of them. Our NHS has actually been, stressed and put on pressure in treating them. Well, now imagine
for Nigel Farage, because a lot of the people that are working, the doctors in NHS, are actually Asians and are from.
And I would like to actually contrast with the actually double standard over here. I mean, I'm looking at today's Evening Standard, and an MP
in front of you.
Yeah, I've got it in front of me. An MP called Naz Shah. I think maybe a couple of years back, she said something about in her social media saying that
maybe Labour MP
that that the US should take a lot of the Israelis and free up Palestine and give liberation to Palestinians. I think this was picked up. And because of that,
I think he posted a image where basically America should take Israelis, and
that's right. And because of that, she's been like witch hunted. Now everyone is actually in her throat saying that she needs to resign. And just to Ken Livingstone just came as a support, and she said, look, there's nothing to do with anti-Semitism here. And now they are actually attacking Ken Livingstone and saying that he should resign. And there's been a lot of pressure put on, Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party because of this.
Because Ken Livingstone, what he said.
But when it comes to Muslims and when it comes to people who can't actually defend themselves, then everyone can actually be on the bandwagon and actually attack them and malign them in terms of minorities, siphoning our NHS system and welfare system, and it's okay to say that. But when it comes to Israelis, no one can even say anything, even imply anything. Because they will be branded as anti-Semitic. And this is the double standard that we see. It seems that in UK, if you have money and if you have power and if you can assimilate and if you got the right skin, then you're okay. But if you don't have the right skin and if you don't have power and if you haven't assimilated to their culture,
so we do have a black president in USA.
Yes, we have a black president, but still we have got black riots, where police officers are actually mistreating blacks in other provinces.
But don't you think that's an improvement? I mean, it's improving. Things are getting better.
It's all symbolic in a way. But
if I could ask one question that was answered about that minorities have improved and their rights have improved. But if you can look at the statistics, ethnic minorities, whether they're from the blacks or the Asians, they are economically not better off. They're on the low levels of any statistic you go to, especially the Bangladeshis. I mean, Pakistanis, the Indians, or the West Indians. You look at them. Look at how many people would go to universities, schools. So it may have improved for some. Some may have gone to the top, maybe have got good jobs, but for the vast majority, the minorities are still affected by many of the economic conditions, and it hasn't filtered down to them.
Okay, I'm actually receiving a lot of text, and I've got a lot of questions that I've got here. I want to go through,
sure,
but I want to go through the text. I think the text
fine. They're more
relevant here, isn't it? Yeah. So we had. Okay, so we've got another one from Bilal. We've done that one. What exactly have the establishment done to undermine Muslims? Question for Abu Umar. Yeah. So what exactly have the establishment done to undermine Muslims? That's for you.
Sure.
So that's for you. So keep that in your thing. And then we have another one who says, I don't think Muslims have been discriminated here in the UK. It's the indigenous people that will be a minority. And that's Mark from London. So you want to take that one?
Okay.
Yeah?
Sure.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you look at how the current climate, I mean, we have to go back to,
so the indigenous, meaning the white people that will be becoming, they will soon enough be the minority.
No, I mean, if you look at this is a fear that the majority might have. But if you look at the statistics, approximately
is that fear not created by people like Nigel Farage and
BNP
what's the other one, EDL,
and there's also social media. There's a video on YouTube that says that by 2020 or some year they give, if the whole of Europe will be Eurobia is the naming it Islamic Eurobia, and it's about, we have to be really let's be serious and say, look, majority of Muslims they're not, they're minority. They're still a minority. 60 million people in the UK, and in London there's about probably 800,000 minority. You look at the stats, and if there is a real fear that Muslims are taking over, then we would have been seeing the ethnic minorities or Muslims in 59 million, but we haven't seen that. So it's a mark. I mean,
scaremongering.
Mark, I mean, scaremongering, Mark, and this is something we don't want. We want communities to work together, live together.
So Mark, don't listen to the tabloid news. Yeah. So Sun and Mirror, you need to like get your facts right. Yeah. Okay. So you want to come back to the question that was asked by Lisa, and she said, "What exactly have the establishment done to undermine Muslims? What have they done?"
Well, I think undermining Muslims here in Britain, you see, when actually Britain actually has its foreign policy, when it actually goes to different lands and tries to export democracy, because obviously this country believes in the values of democracy, and in order to actually make other country democratic in the sense that if those leaders actually don't actually follow the standards of international law or the United Nations, where only few countries actually have veto. So I wouldn't actually even say that the United Nations is actually a democratic country. Otherwise, you wouldn't have this veto. So when it actually goes to different countries and it actually engages in war, and sometimes, and a lot of the times, it's in Muslim countries, and the Muslim actually rebel against that war, or actually fight back against the US and American soldiers under the name of Islam. So, and then when Britain finds itself that British Muslims are actually supporting his fellow brothers in Muslim countries, then for example the British government comes out and says that no, you should not actually support your Muslim brethren in other countries. You should support the British troops. So when it finds that Muslims are holding on to their values and their world brotherhood of Muslim brotherhood and the other values that are associated with Islam, it sees this as a threat. When it sees this as a threat, it actually undermines the Muslim community. It actually is trying to actually force the Muslim community to abandon their values.
Is he not talking about the ideas that it undermines? So, for example, the attack on hijab and the attack on
So one of the ways to actually, the reason why it's attacks on hijab and all these values is that by attacking hijab, if they can actually remove people wearing from hijab, sort of like abandon the notion of the whole world's brotherhood of Islam, then it will be actually easier for Britain to assimilate the Muslims into British culture.
I just want to come into Lisa's point and to really hit it home. Britain as a country has been trying to deal with minorities. So from 1955 to 1970, it tried assimilation, which is a one-way track here. Then from 1970 to 1980 it tried integration. That didn't work. Then from 1980 to 1995 it tried multiculturalism. And then from 1995 to 2002 back to integration. And then now in the current climate it's all about assimilation, like it was in the 1955. We have come full circle. And you can see that it has changed. They have chopped and changed, trying to force the minorities to accept this value by multiculturalism, assimilation, integration. And then we come to Muslims and really hit the home with Lisa's point is we see the introduction of citizen ceremonies to the Counter-Terrorism Act, the Channel Program, the Prevent Program, the McCarthy witch hunt against Muslim, the very politically charged words like radicalization or extremism, Counter-Terrorism Act, Contest 2. These are, and even if Muslims believe in certain ideas, they believe that we need to have segregation, caliphate, or are they against homosexuality? These are now become indicators of extremism, and I'm afraid that, as Abu Umar was saying, maybe now anyone who speaks against Israel is another form of extremism coming down the line.
So the point here is, are minorities less of a citizen, and are they seen as second class?
Well, discussing all this, I think it becomes a bit clearer that these are this section of these communities are actually not wholeheartedly embraced by the indigenous population of this country. I think even if you actually ask the Scottish people, what do you view yourself as? They will say we view ourselves first Scottish and then British. If you actually ask the Welsh people, they will say first Welsh, then British. And the study was actually also conducted, and this was asked by the Muslims as well, and they said, we feel ourselves British. So British Muslim has tried to actually integrate into the society. They do actually recognize themselves as British, but it's not enough.
Well, my point is, minorities have always been seen as second-class citizens. Even if you look at Saudi Arabia, if you look at what's happening in Burma, for example,
I mean,
the point is, that's a fact. It will always be.
Yeah, it's a fact. The thing is, I think under Islam, you also have, for example, dhimmis. Dhimmis regarded.
No, hold on. Let's not go into because I want to come in to talk about Islam. I want to talk about generally minorities. Are they seen as
I think this is
second-class citizens? Sorry, Ahmad, you want to come in?
Yeah, I'll say this is minorities all around the world are treated badly. If you can see, we can go to the past and to the present. In the past, we can see how the Aborigine people in Australia were treated, where children were removed from the families forcefully to culturally assimilate them. In the US, we saw how they tried to deal with minorities with the native Indians, and it's really a book that you should read. It's called Into the Heart, which shows how they destroyed the Red Indians, whether it's the Portuguese or the Spanish or the Americans, and how they forced them to accept their beliefs. Then we see in the current days, we see in France where there were riots in the estates. We see in the UK where there was riots in Brixton to the Bradford riots. Even in India, they have issues of dealing with minorities, where they have and it's supposedly one of the biggest democracies in the world. But they have certain second-class citizens, where they have a class system, where certain people have to do certain jobs, and they never could come out from that job.
I mean, I just want to maybe touch on, if you look at Burma.
I mean, I've written a report about Burma, an extensive report, and in Burma,
is that found on the web?
I can give it to you. It's a in-depth program to show how Burma is a country that hasn't dealt with ethnic minorities. We see Muslims in Burma are put into concentration camps. You can say it. Literally camps. They cannot work or leave the camps. If they want to get married, they need to have permission.
Well, last couple of years, we've seen the pictures on the internet and on the news where they were drifting on
Yeah.
sea, really, because
This is it, because
Bangladesh did not want to take
no
them
one
in.
wants them.
No one wanted them.
They are the persecuted, one of the most persecuted people on earth, and you can.
But
see
that's the extreme of minorities, yeah.
This is where
abuse.
and this is what pushes them to go into the sea and take the journey. And we see that with the Burmese, they have a limit on the children they can have. If they have illnesses in the camp, they die. And if they leave the camp and they are found by the people that are very nationalistic, then they'll be killed. So it's really in Burma they are facing. That's why it's pushing them to go to countries, and no one is taking up their call in that sense. Even in Saudi Arabia, we see people are in Qatar or Saudi. They're building stadiums, and their passports are taken.
Dubai is built on the back of Pakistanis, Bangladeshis,
Nepalese,
and so Asians really.
They are the Indian subcontinent are the workers in the Middle East, but their passports are taken, their wages are not paid on time. Many of them would never want to be there because of the way they're treated, and their rights are not taken up. No one wants to hear about them, and
it's almost slavery, because they can't leave, isn't it?
I mean,
when they have the Iqama visa, they can't leave.
I just wanted to actually say that we have to actually give a lot of the sometimes credit to the whole if you like United Nations or the League of Nations, for coming up and drafting UN constitutions like UN Declaration on Rights of Persons Belonging to National or Ethnic, Religious and Linguistic Minorities. So there are actually resolutions like this, like 47/135 of 18 December 1992. In an Article 1, which actually states that the protection of existence and national or ethnic, cultural, religious or linguistic identity of minorities within their respective territories should be protected. But these things, and there's also like Article 2, which actually states that a lot of the minorities should be given the rights. But like Brother Ahmad has said, that when it comes to places like Burma, we saw how people's houses were fired at. Communities after communities, their houses were burned, people were hacked, babies were hacked, blood was spilling all over, and the whole world actually did not lifted by eyelid, as they say. So we saw, for example, because, and even Aung San Suu Kyi, this woman who was a champion of democratic rights in Burma,
Nobel Prize winner,
and she's also a Nobel Prize winner as well. When this question was asked to her about the mistreatment or barbaric atrocities committed against the Rohingya Muslims in Burma, she says that I didn't thought that these were Burmese or they were citizens of Burma. So this is the attitude.
Abu Umar, if I can say, the Burmese they're not from Bangladesh, the Muslims. They're actually originally 800 years ago they came in the time of Harun Rashid's time, and they lived and have always lived in Burma, and they can trace their ancestry back. So they are not people from another country.
Okay, I mean it's, there's so much we can talk about. Why do we have this idea of minority and majority? Should they not just be citizens, as they are equally paying tax, fulfilling their rights to a state as a citizen? So, for example, here, I mean, if you look at the Muslims or the minority community here, they're paying their tax. They're contributing to the society more than some of the indigenous people.
I think if you look at, for example, yes, minorities have actually, let's say a lot of immigrants have actually contributed a lot to this, society. If you look at the curry industry from Bangladeshi restaurants, that goes into, billions, probably billions in terms of.
Well, I can tell you, there's over 10,000 Indian restaurants in this country.
In this country, if you look at all these shops, gold
That's
shops.
That's a fact, by the way.
Gold shops. If you look at also the metal steel industry, is owned by Indian, Tata. So Muslims and minorities were
they're creating a lot of jobs.
And also, for example, like Polish people, I've seen Polish people in my street, they're very entrepreneurial. They opened up barber shops, they opened up shops, and I'm sure they're paying tax, unlike a company like Amazon and Cameron's father evading tax into offshore companies and all these other big shots. But when it comes to these immigrants, they are actually contributing a lot to this country. If you look at the nurses from Philippines and the doctors from the Indian subcontinent, they are paying taxes, and all these shops. And not only that, I think these are strengthening the country. If you actually were to actually ask the CBI, which is the Business Industry Federation, they will always oppose any government's endeavor to actually control too tightly against coming of immigrants. They say that immigration in this country has made this country a better country rather than a country where immigrants have actually used up and siphoned up resources. But I think these sort of things actually happen, as I said, is to do with petty politics that politicians and the media play in the minds of shallow people, vulnerable people who have shallow understanding about geopolitics, understanding about sociology, and they play into the minds of these people.
Okay. So Britain or the West in general prides itself as a tolerant society. Right. Now, if it has to force its minority citizens to accept its way of life, values, which may completely go against Muslim values, is it truly tolerant?
No, it will not be, because Britain cannot, in one hand, say, for example, like you have the right of belief and we will not discriminate you based on your color, race, creed, or whatever. You have freedom to exercise all this. And on the other hand, if Muslims or any nationality were not to actually abandon, for example, like the brotherhood, or
their cultural, their values,
or cultural values, or religious practices,
in that case,
and things
maybe
like that.
Because Muslims,
with Muslims, it's a bit difficult, because Muslim has a view about the world, view about the wrongs and the rights and opinions on every matter, unlike any other religions. So Muslim would have a view about economic policies. They have a view about how social, politics is, foreign policy, education system. So they will oppose things like evolution, and they will actually comment on. They will say, no, this is wrong. So, for example, when it comes to homosexuality, they will say, no, this is wrong.
Is that a clash of civilization? Is that what you're saying?
This creates a clash of civilization. So when it comes to modesty, they have an opinion on this. And this is why it's a bit tricky for these governments to actually handle, especially Muslims. And this is why...
Is it tricky for them to assimilate the Muslims into this
society?
And
as
also,
I said before, they tried it. From the 1950s, they've been trying different ways to assimilate. And if we
but 1950s, particularly Muslim, because now we can see there's an onslaught in terms of trying to get the Muslims to accept, and it may be... that's where Islamophobia and all this is coming out, But when you talk about 50s, is it? It's not Muslims. I don't think that.
No, what point I'm trying to make is minorities have been they've been trying to assimilate, integrate minorities for a long time, and some minorities have, and when they adopt the values, that's for them is an issue that is they've integrated or assimilated. But we see the Muslim community has still holding on to Islam. They're still holding on to their values. And they're still, saying that we believe in our way of life. But it doesn't mean that we isolate ourselves from society. I don't want the listeners to think that we want to say we want to isolate ourselves. No, we still have our values. And this is the issue, that they still have an issue. And that's why you see certain
do they expect Muslims to show overtly show their loyalty and love to Britain be accepted?
It's not about just eating fish and chips and saying then they'll be happy with you. No, it's more about the value based, and they want certain Muslims to give up certain ideals, and this is what they want. It's about certain beliefs that they want people to, like democracy, or the belief of the rights of people.
I think when I just wanted to actually bring a bit more clarity. It's necessarily not our value and your value. I mean, the thing is, because it actually sort of like vie one against the other. I think what Muslims are trying to actually say that, look, there is actually we believe in a universal value, and I think this value is correct and is open for debate. So let's actually debate these values. So the values of Islam, it has an opinion on economic matters. So it has it's an opinion on interest-based system. It has an opinion on whether let's say, alcohol or homosexuality or modesty or evolution. It has an opinion over these things.
I mean, the point I want to make is basically. I think you just go in. You didn't answer my question. I said, look, there are personalities, there are community leaders who are overtly showing their loyalty to this country, but yet they are finding it very difficult and they are not accepted. So, for example, if you look at Sheikh Suleiman Ghani, and if you look at some of the personalities that have come on, you've mentioned the Labour Party. What's her name? Nasha. Yeah. So they've been you've seen they've been within the political framework. They've actually
you see
they're working within the system.
There is a saying,
yet we find that
there is a saying that if you started off with a lie, then you have to lie a bit more to get yourself out or to save yourself. So because for the Muslim community has been on the brunt of Islamophobic attacks, sometimes even people personally like Suleiman Ghani and other people or Baroness Barris, Miss Warsi, even if they actually succumbed all their efforts into actually integrating and assimilating into the British belief system, if you like, and opinions and values about life, still sometimes there crops up an opportunity where they have to be sort of like attacked upon, because the media and the politicians have created a society where it seems that you can easily score a political point if you can actually attack someone.
Okay.
If I come in, about that point about loyalty, we do not need, Islam gives us clear guidelines of how to live in a majority where non-Muslim people live. It shows how Islam tells us about how our neighbors have rights, how we should not cheat or steal. Our loyalty is to Islam and its ideals, and that we should not be living separate lives. Rather, people will respect and love us more when we practice Islam to the best of our efforts, and when we become more good examples, then they can see the real beauty of Islam.
But as minorities and Muslims in Britain, should we compromise our deen to be accepted? Shouldn't we feel grateful that we are living in the West and we are benefiting from the system? Shouldn't we?
I mean, the thing is, yes, we are living in the West. Yes, there is I can actually
not slightly compromise.
I can actually admit, for example, like rather than living in a lot of the Muslim countries which are ruled by dictators and which are actually ridden with political strife and violence, Britain is relatively very more comfortable places to live. But that doesn't mean that because of this comfort, Muslims should actually leave their conscience when it comes to injustices and oppression. So Muslims should actually speak the truth when it comes to certain matters, and I think this is where the problem with the Muslim community is that sometimes you need to keep quiet and you should not actually speak for what you think is justice. Sometimes you have to actually toe the party line. This is why we find that even a lot of the Labour Party candidates, MPs within the party, if they speak their mind and speak their conscience when it comes to like foreign policy or when it comes to even domestic policies, sometimes you'd find that many times you find that the party whips will actually bring you into line. So, and I think, if politicians and media create a population of this country to be sort of like not stand on what is truth and what is justice, then you'll have all these, squabbles in the society. You'll have a lot of all these frictions.
Okay, we might have to just go over a little bit, but I've got, I want to talk about Islam, how does Islam view minorities? And how would they be treated under a Islamic system?
Okay.
I think that's something that we want to try and just look at.
I think it's important, and Muslims need to go with the mindset from today, at least, to know that Islam has a way of dealing with minorities. The following is to be a citizen in Islam is dependent on one's place of residence and upon a choice to be a part of a community that together follow the lead of that state. Under Islam, to be a citizen as a minority has nothing to do with values. So we do not force our minorities in Islam to adopt certain values, culture or belief, or have a conviction in the law of the state. It has everything to do with belonging. Even at the state, if Muslims lived outside of the Islamic state, the Khilafah, then they would not be regarded as citizens, whilst the minorities living in the Khilafah will be regarded as citizens as they reside within the state. Under Islam, minorities are viewed as human beings who have the right to security, tranquility, health, social and welfare care, regardless of their creed, gender, race, and things. Under Islam, everyone has to, including the minorities, have to obey laws like traffic laws, employment prohibition, and theft. But certain things are under Islam, for the Muslims, do not affect the minorities. For example, 5 daily prayers, zakat. So the
non-Muslims they don't have to pray.
No. We won't force them to pray. We know the.
Well, I mean, they don't. In this country, no one is forcing you to go to the church or.
No, it's not about forcing to. It's about they're trying to force their ideas on us. And in under Islam, we have no forced assimilation policies where we will try to force them. We give the minorities, they can hold positions of work. They can live there. They can raise their children.
Will you allow them to drink alcohol?
If it's part of their requirements of their religion, then there'll be facilities for that. They can transport for their religious requirements, and if it's in the privacy of their home, then there is policies about this. And if I can quote
What about homosexuality?
About what?
Yeah, I mean, will they be allowed? I mean, what's the deal? Because you said, look, they have this concept of freedom. They have this concept of, freedom to express yourself. So what about homosexuality? How would Islam deal with those? I know this is different, but in terms of minorities, they are, how does it deal?
I mean, you have to look at that. Islam has certain rules and requirements, and if it's an act that is, generally that is enshrined, then you have to abide by that, and this is how Islam will deal with it. And it's an illegal act, and Islam will look at that, and the judge and the courts will decide that.
But is that not enforcing your laws on these minorities? Sorry, I'm just sorry, Abu Umar, you wanted to come in.
I just wanted to say that, going back to, how Islam actually views, minorities, I think Prophet ﷺ said, this is the personality where Michael H. Hart said that is the most influential person ever to live in this face of this earth. He put Muhammad ﷺ at the number one. And that person, Muhammad ﷺ, actually said, if anyone were to actually harm a minority or a dhimmi or in the state, then he has harmed me. And also, there's another incident where a non-Muslim or a dhimmi, if you like, when that person died, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam he was actually lamenting over the fact that he couldn't actually make this person, believe in the beauty of Islam or the justice of Islam and the belief in one God and the hereafter. So he was lamenting over this fact that we couldn't do it. So this is how much we actually, or the Muslim actually view, or Islam actually views the ethnic minorities or the people of other religions, etc. Also, we also found that whenever Muslims in the past, in the Islamic Empire time, Islamic States time, in the Caliphate's time, it treated the non-Muslims equally. So we find that a lot of the researchers and scientists have become, came from, Jews and came from other religious, minorities. And when the crusade happened, the crusader had to actually face, their fellow Christians, against them, because the Christians who were living in the Islamic State sided the Muslims of the Islamic State.
What I'm saying is basically, look,
so it was a melting pot,
under the Islamic Islamic ruling system, you
Yeah.
have the social system, you have
Yes.
the economic system, and this will be enforced on the citizens. So, like I was saying to Brother Abu Umar, that look, there are certain acts that maybe publicly they can't do. So for drinking, or someone he has it's the state's business is not his sexual orientation or whatever. Do you see? So really, I think the point that you've made is that they will be treated equally in terms of they will have their rights. That's the point that you've made, isn't it?
I mean, the state will not actually snoop into people's private places,
this is the
private
point,
places, but it will not actually, for example, allow propagation of, let's say, export and importing of alcohol, or for example, open display of homosexuality.
Or any sexual act. You
because
won't publicly allow
that's right, because
someone to-
every society has its own beliefs and has its own rules and laws. Yeah, and it actually enacts them. So, for example, anyone who seem to actually set a semblance of actually imply anything to do with anti-Semitism, he would be actually banned from work, orchestrated, ostracized. From, and we can see all these things. So why not Islamic State as well? So it has its own values, it has its own morals, and it will actually
we're running out of
those.
time, but I just wanted to quickly finish off with the question: what should be the role of the Muslims living in Britain? So Muslims living in Britain under all of these realities that we're facing, what should we do?
I mean, the proponents of actually Tony Blair, or if you asked the President Barack Obama, wherever they go, they have one job, and this is to promote democracy. This is to promote democracy and capitalism. Because this is something that they believe, and we are saying that this is wrong. Democracy and capitalism does not actually settle with the man's instincts, but Muslims actually believe in Islam. And they have rationally come to this conclusion that God, Allah exists, and He is the creator of this universe, and He has given rules and guidelines for people's affairs and how people should conduct their lives. And He has actually bestowed a grave responsibility, an immense responsibility on the shoulders of Muslims, or those who actually believe that there is a creator behind this universe. And wherever Muslims are, they have that responsibility, and this responsibility are to do with social life when it comes to economic issues, political issues, and public issues. So Muslims should actually never abandon their beliefs, because it is end of the day this is what they believe in as to be the truth about life, and they should stand by this against any sort of other forms of opinions.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Abu Umar. A last word from Brother
I think it's just a few points with the time short. I think we need more of Islam than less of it. As Muslims living in the UK, we need to live
more of Islam for the society, or for ourselves?
For the Muslims to be a guide, to be an example, to be ambassadors. We need to show our values. We need to show the positive aspects of Muslims.
We shouldn't shy away.
We shouldn't shy away. We should not be isolationists. We should be engaging in debate, treating our neighbours well. We should be talking about politics around the world, trying to give solutions to any issues that the people are facing, and generally being a positive role model for the Muslims in the UK.
Jazakallah khair. This is a very lengthy subject. I think we went a couple of minutes, 5 minutes or 10 minutes over our normal time. But look, again, you can discuss this on our YouTube channel, which is Middle Path Radio. You can leave your comments, and if we can, we'll get some of the brothers to maybe answer those questions if you do have any questions. But I would really like to thank the brothers for sacrificing their evening and coming down to the studios and sharing their thoughts on this important subject. So Jazakallah khair, brothers.
Jazakallah, thank you.
Jazakallah khair.
And a special thanks to all our listeners listeners for listening and contributing to this show. We had so many texts, so I do apologize if I have not read any, missed out some of those. We really appreciate your comments and questions. So join in next week and take part, inshallah. You can also follow us on Twitter at Middle Path Radio and continue with this discussion. So remember, it's every Thursday at 9 p.m. inshallah. And don't forget, you can listen to this show and the previous ones that you may have missed by visiting our website, which is www.straight-talk.co.uk. Again, thanks for listening and listening to Middle Path Radio. I hope you have a pleasant evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Middle Path Radio, your number one online Islamic talk station.